Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Jean Patterson, a member of the congregation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. I see so many familiar faces, but I also see some that I don't recognize. If we have any visitors or members who have brought guests, would you please stand, give us your name, and tell us where you're from? Anyone? No visitors?
Well, I ran into these people out on the street.
Oh, well, okay. Just drag them in, Jane. Oh, welcome. Oh, and Katie is one of our favorite actresses here in town. Anyone else? Well, we're awfully glad you're with us today. And today we have a special first here at All Souls. We have a new intern with us this year, Jack Gaede, and he will be giving his first sermon for us this year. So we're really excited about that. Jack?
Rolling ocean,
Pictured by the seers of old.
Though below me I feel no motion,
Wondrous things of it are told. Wise and righteous people sailing,
casting questions into the deep, making our way by the light of the heavens as we ply the starry sea. Sun my sail and moon my rudder,
all our joys and all our groans,
leaning over the edge in wonder. Kindred mine,
all must aid alike to carry forward one sublime design.
I give thanks to the waves upholding me,
Oft with bleeding hands and tears,
greet the infinite sea before me,
never perishing with our years. It will live and shine transfigured in the final reign of right. Everlasting light shines o'er it, justice reigns supreme o'er might.
I've been sailing all my life now,
I've been called to task divine, and the work that I have built will pass into the splendor of night.
I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
As we gather today, some of us have tender hearts, feeling only a fraction of an inch away from tears. Some of us feel lighthearted and fresh, cherishing the signs of seasonal change. Some of us have allergies beyond our control, and some of us are controlling things beyond our scope. Some of us have been bowled over by recent devastations and loss, whether hurricane, war, earthquake, or flood. Some of us are struggling just to stay afloat with finances or relationships, emotions or motivation. Some of us are feeling the warm contentment of family, of friends, of fellowship. For all these things and for our experiences across the whole spectrum of life, we celebrate. A prayer by my friend and colleague, Zir Alex Capitan. Spirit of the universe, life force that flows through all beings, power beyond our knowing, we ask you to help us see beyond our dependence on opposites, to transcend our desire to know who is like us and who is not. Open us to the knowledge that in this room there are complexities and diversities of identities, beyond black and white, old and young, woman and man, poor and rich, uneducated and educated, disabled and able-bodied, gay and straight, ill and healthy, wrong and right, broken and whole. In this room there are people who embody juxtaposition, who can tell stories written on their bodies about both and neither, who carry intimate pieces of the truth that there is no such thing as opposites. Spirit of many names and of no name at all, help us find release from our belief that all things must be either or. This belief that walls us off from one another, ensnaring us in a battle of same versus different. Help us to open our minds, to listen deeply, and to truly know one another, finally glimpsing the kaleidoscopic beauty of the divine. Please rise in body and spirit. Hymn number 350 in the gray hymnal. Let's light the chalice first. Sorry, Khalil. Stealing your thunder here.
Good morning. My name is Khalil, and I light this chalice for the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Thanks, Khalil. Perfect. Now please rise in body or spirit. Hymn 350.
The presence slips into the
Please join me in the words of our covenant. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Let's sing the children out to their classrooms.
Well, good morning. My name is Carol Coles, and I'm a fairly new member of your congregation, and I'm here today to talk with you about the best part of my week. The best part of my week are the 3 days in the middle of the week that I get to spend part of my time at Carver, George Washington Carver Dual Language School. On Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon, I work with individual children or sometimes small groups if the plea of, "Can I go with ya?" manages to add one or two to my group. And then on Wednesdays, first thing in the morning, I get to start by namasteing, aka doing yoga or animal shapes on the ground, as one of the students told me it really should be called. So we as a congregation support this school, and it gives us a wonderful opportunity both to know some fabulous young people and their families, and some teachers who give so much both in the classroom and outside the classroom to the educational experience of all of our children. In fact, last year, the Kansas City School District recognized one of the teachers at Carver, Derek Wiggins, who honestly looks like he's 12 years old, as Kansas City's outstanding teacher. And I certainly, if I had gotten to choose, would have done the same thing. He has a special handshake for everyone, and he has particular chants that he uses in the classroom to kind of motivate people from the left side of the room to the right side of the room to up to down to go into groups and so forth. And it all looks so easy, and I know it's so difficult. So why am I talking with you about Carver? I'm talking with you because, first of all, I was in Kansas City for approximately 11 days before Peg Maher told me that I really could consider volunteering, and Peg and John are the people to talk with about this wonderful opportunity, but also to talk with you about how your contributions impact these children. These children are incredible. They are loved, they are supported, they are resilient. The things that they deal with oftentimes outside the classroom are many and varied, and there are fewer of them this year than there were last year. And the whisper is, "She went back to Mexico. He had to leave. He's not here anymore." I work with one little boy, and this is the third year with whom that I've worked with him, and he read me his story about the police with ice on their backs at the door. So we can do some things, and each of us can do at least one thing, and that is to offer an offering so that these children have some experiences that are outside of those that our schools can provide. And in the next 2 weeks, I think you'll hear more about what your specific offerings do support, but I would like very much for you to start this process today by donating and writing in your little ledger space, special offering Carver. Thank you.
Now, will you join me as we dedicate our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create a just and compassionate society.
What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up. They can bust you. They can break your fingers. They can burn your brain with electricity. Blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't blame them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight. You can refuse. You can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. Two people fighting back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more.
Papa, I've been looking everywhere for you. Listen to me. Papa, I beg you to accept us.
Accept them? How can I accept them? Can I deny everything I believe in? On the other hand, deny my own daughter? On the other hand, how can I turn my back on my faith, my people? If I try and bend that far, I'll break. The other hand, no, there is no other hand. No, Papa, no, Papa. No, no, Papa,
Picture it with me. The year is 1543. The printing press has been around for just over a century now, and it has caused quite a bit of scandal. With this newfangled technology, ideas spread like wildfire. Radical ideas, heretical ideas, upsetting ideas, even ideas that threaten the powers that be. Imagine for a moment that you are a well-educated person of means. You have spent most of your life studying science, art, mathematics, theology, and the classics. Then, one day, a book falls into your hands, a revolutionary book. It is the book by Copernicus that explains his radical theory that the sun does not revolve around the earth. That despite all of our best minds and years of thinking, we have been getting it wrong all along. The prevalent myth at the time was that the universe existed for humans, for our survival, for our flourishing. The sun rose and fell so that we would have light and warmth. Up until this point, the earth had reigned supreme, and all of our ways of knowing had been acquired through a geocentric worldview. Copernicus challenged this supremacy of the earth by recentering the focus on the sun. With the arrival of this heliocentric lens, the way that we understand astronomy and science changed forever. This decentering of the earth was a revolutionary act, partially because it endangered the power structure of the day. It must have been devastating, both for the peasant and the emperor, to be told that one was astronomically less important than one had previously thought. And I bet that some people got very defensive. For instance, Philip Melanchthon, the Protestant reformer, who said that wise rulers should have curbed such light-mindedness as that of Copernicus, who moves the earth and stops the sun. I find it ironic that he attacks the sun-centered worldview of Copernicus as light-minded, when Copernicus's whole point is that we should be more light-minded, as in more centered on the sun, whence comes our light. But I wouldn't want us to miss the gravity of his statement either. He is suggesting that a wise ruler should squash this idea. And we know how ideas at this time were squashed. Books were collected and burned, often along with the author. We see in this quote how threatening it is and how threatened rulers often feel when the center shifts. What does it mean when new centers emerge, when new truths come to light? How do we summon up the courage and the humility to live in the glaring and sometimes harsh light of these new truths? In my study of Unitarian Universalism, I have often been left in awe at our ability to encounter and accept revolutionary ideas. And yet, I have also been consistently surprised by the history of our own self-centeredness. UU theologian Paul Razor summarizes it best when he says, "Liberals want to create a strong and inclusive community, but we often want to do it without giving up anything, without letting down the barriers we erect around ourselves in the name of individual autonomy." I understand this tension. Individual autonomy is so important. Our free and responsible search for truth and meaning depends on it. But sometimes our own philosophical and theological certainties get in our way. Sometimes they act as barriers separating us from each other. And when we put up too many of these barriers, we begin to realize that we are no longer in a circle of embrace, but rather we are in a box, hemmed up on all four sides. Sometimes we realize that we are in an echo chamber. But one of the ways to lower a barrier is to encounter truly and listen deeply to a person whose ideas are different from our own. What happens, for instance, when a humanist-leaning congregation begins to encounter new types of humanists who aren't as opposed to religious expression? I recently went to a humanism conference where there was a panel of distinguished and diverse humanist thinkers. There were many common threads, but the primary one, interwoven throughout the weekend, was the call to expand our understanding of humanism. They called us to lower the barriers present within humanism that are casting shadows on some of the less explored nooks of humanist thought. They called us to shine a light on the complexity and diversity of the voices within humanism. Humanism today cannot afford to be monolithic or inflexible. Just listen to the words written on this stone that I found in Kendall's office. it says, "Nothing is written in stone." But these shade-causing barriers demand a little more attention and a quick primer in millennial lingo. You see, the phrase "to throw shade" is lingo, meaning to judge harshly or criticize with a stinging bite and caustic wit. It is sometimes represented in picture form as a person giving side-eye. The core image of light and shadows still exists, because if you are throwing shade, you are turning your back on the shade recipient. You are refusing to shine your light and love on them, even maybe blocking or eclipsing the light from some greater sun. You are withholding from them understanding and compassion. There are, of course, light-hearted forms of throwing shade, but there are also devastating occurrences of walls being built, barriers being erected, and separations being created and sustained that absolutely break our hearts. Let's start with the context that I know best, having lived there for half of my life, the Twin Cities. It wasn't until I got involved in the Black Lives Matter movement that I understood the depth and depravity of the mistake that was made when Interstate 94 was constructed. The city planners of St. Paul had a few different options about where to place this new freeway system. But the route that they chose in 1956 cut right down the middle of a black community called the Rondo neighborhood, where over 80% of the city's African American population lived. It was an up-and-coming neighborhood with black businesses, black homeowners, and the burgeoning centralization of economic power for a community hitherto marginalized. The freeway became a physical barrier separating neighbors and tearing the neighborhood apart. More than 600 black families lost their homes. In the meantime, 4 miles up the road, west of St. Paul in Minneapolis, the city planners there built a tunnel to run Interstate 94 underneath an affluent and historic white neighborhood. Isn't it interesting when we start to study and pay attention to which neighborhoods get displaced or devalued, and which neighborhoods remain intact, with city planners going out of the way or even under the way, lest they disturb the peace? As I arrived here in Kansas City, one of my first assignments was to read an excerpt from the book called "Some of My Best Friends Are Black." It is a national exploration of race relations and racial segregation in 4 different realms: school, neighborhood, workplace, and church. In each of these separate realms, the author, Tanner Colby, looks specifically at one area of the nation which serves as a case study that best elucidates the problem of racial segregation. For the section on neighborhoods, housing, and real estate, he studies Kansas City and the unfortunate yet intentionally choreographed white flight to suburbia and the resultant economic depression of the area east of Troost. He discusses the racial contracts that prohibited white families from selling their homes to black families. He discusses the practice of blockbusting that was rampant primarily in the white neighborhoods that bordered the black neighborhoods, and which spread south over 40 blocks of land just east of Troost. And he discusses the intense but subtle racial coding of the advertisements intended to draw white people from the urban danger zone to safe white suburbia. Studying this history was riveting and challenging at the same time, especially when we consider Kansas City was not the only city with racial contracts and racially coded propaganda. If anything, it was the rule more than the exception. What makes it even more heart-wrenching is knowing that these racist real estate laws and practices have present-day ramifications, and not just in Kansas City, but in cities across the nation. Troost Avenue used to be a corridor that was alive with people and traffic, commerce and community. And now, many of the businesses along that strip have shuttered, and some real estate agents still refuse to show any homes east of Troost to white prospective homebuyers, saying seemingly harmless things like, "Oh, you don't want to live east of Troost." But what we need to realize is that phrases like these contribute to the structure of systemic racism. Unless we act boldly to dismantle that old prejudice, we will perpetuate the lie that someone else started many years ago, which has caused a long and painful north to south scar on this city, an embodied representation of structural racism, much like the scar of Interstate 94 in St. Paul. It might be easy to say, "I oppose white supremacy," when what you picture is white men in khakis with torches, or KKK members marching down the street. But what does it mean to take a bold stance against the more subtle forms of white supremacy? White supremacy might look like a kind of thinking that centers white people and their needs over and against the needs of others. Or it might look like allowing a freeway to disrupt a black neighborhood while pushing it underground to avoid disrupting a white one. White supremacy might look like keeping poor people and people of color in specific neighborhoods while lowering and restraining the property values there. Or it might look like inviting, or even manipulating, white people to move out of those very same neighborhoods, taking with them their wealth, resources, and economic boon, and allowing them to build and solidify their collective power elsewhere. This is the real grist, the matters that need to be looked at with a naked eye, which just so happens to be the reason that Kendall and I will be teaching a class on the concepts of white supremacy starting this week. When sociologists and social critic theorists talk about racism, systemic racism, and structural racism, this is what they mean. And this is the racism that I feel called as a white person to help dismantle. Just as it took a lot of work and energy to dismantle Earth supremacy in Copernicus's time, it will take a lot of work to dismantle white supremacy and to decenter whiteness. In the meantime, there are people who have historically been on the margins, who are consolidating their power, using their voices, and continuing to claim their place in this country, in Unitarian Universalism, and in our neighborhoods, schools, workplaces, and churches. Are you listening to those voices? Our history is not pure and blameless. It is complex and messy. One of the strengths of our Unitarian Universalist faith is that it teaches us about the importance of encountering ideas and people of all shapes and sizes, types and colors. And one of the strengths of our faith is to be able to navigate those potentially rough waters. We are not a unanimous, unilateral, or monolithic church. We are flexible. We are not held together by one belief or by one set of beliefs, but rather we share common values and principles that guide us on our search for meaning and truth. And that search for truth leads us to honestly confront our history while looking imaginatively toward the future, holding tradition in tension with innovation. They are both important, and they are not mutually exclusive. However, what I want to warn us against is a celebration of our tradition that neglects its fullness and complexity, a version of our history that fails to explore our shortcomings, faults, and transgressions. Much like the people in Copernicus's time who had to dig deep for humility that would allow them to understand that our knowledge might be imperfect and limited. Let us be a people who welcome mind-expanding, tradition-breaking knowledge. Let us not deny the reality of our history, jaded though it is, but embrace it in all of its complexity, finding ways to grow and learn from it. Let us not live our life in the shadows, but let us step into the bold and even harsh light of truth. Let us say we and know who we mean, and each day let us mean one more. Make it so, and amen. Please rise in body or spirit. Hymn number 1017 in the teal hymnal. Don't forget, nothing is written in stone. I hope that we are ready for this work, and I hope that we are willing to give something up. I pray for courage and humility, and I pray for radical and dangerous ideas that threaten the powers that be. I love throwing an appropriate amount of shade at racism in all of its subtle and not so subtle forms. And I love lowering the barriers that we have erected around ourselves and between each other in the name of individual autonomy. I cherish the ability to depart from traditions that no longer serve our purpose. And I cherish the opportunity to create a strong and inclusive community, a more expansive we. Go forth in this knowledge, and go forth in peace.
It's rich to all works.